What happens when a professional athlete's body literally shuts down mid-game, leaving her paralyzed on the court while thousands watch in horror? Kelsey Mitchell's terrifying collapse during the Indiana Fever's playoff run exposed something dark about the WNBA that nobody wants to talk about. And what she revealed 2 days later would shake the entire league to its core. Picture this. Game 5 of the playoffs. The stakes couldn't be higher. Kelsey Mitchell drains a three-pointer, adrenaline pumping, crowd roaring. Then in an instant, everything goes black. Her legs give out. She can't feel her feet, can't move. Her body has completely betrayed her in the most critical moment of her career. The diagnosis? Rhabdomyolysis. A condition so severe that it literally causes your muscles to break down and release toxins into your bloodstream. The kind of thing that can cause permanent kidney damage or worse. But here's the thing that nobody's talking about. This wasn't some freak accident. This was the inevitable result of a system that's breaking its players. Before we dive deeper into what really happened, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe, because we're about to expose some uncomfortable truths about the WNBA that the league doesn't want you to know. Drop a comment below telling us if you think the WNBA is pushing its players too hard. Now let's get into it. When Kelsey finally spoke to the media 2 days after the incident, she was still processing the trauma. She admitted something that should alarm every single person who cares about women's basketball. She said her legs were so numb, so paralyzed that she couldn't feel her feet. Think about that for a second. A professional athlete in peak physical condition, suddenly unable to control her own body. The medical team told her she'd lost a dangerous amount of fluid. Her bloodstream had essentially stopped flowing properly to her extremities. This is the kind of medical emergency that ends careers, that changes lives forever. But what caused it? Kelsey's answer was brutally honest, and it revealed a systemic problem in the WNBA. She said it was overusage, plain and simple. She'd never played that long before, never made it to the postseason in her career. And when she finally got there, she pushed herself beyond what her body could handle, because that's what the league demands. That's what it takes to compete at an elite level when you're playing a compressed schedule with minimal rest and maximum pressure. She even made a pointed comment that some found controversial. She said she didn't know how random it was that rhabdomyolysis would happen in a playoff Game 5, but that was a conversation for another day. What was she implying? That the scheduling, the workload, the demands placed on these athletes create conditions where catastrophic injuries become inevitable? Let's talk about what rhabdomyolysis actually is, because this isn't just your typical sports injury. When your muscles break down from extreme exertion, they release a protein called myoglobin into your bloodstream. This protein can clog your kidneys and cause them to fail. We're talking about a life-threatening condition. Military personnel get it during extreme training exercises. Marathon runners in extreme heat. CrossFit athletes who push too hard. But professional basketball players in a controlled arena environment? That should be raising massive red flags about training protocols and player management. But that wasn't the whole story. What happened next on that court would reveal the true character of the Indiana Fever roster and expose just how tight this team had become. When Kelsey went down, it wasn't just medical staff who rushed to her side. Aliyah Boston, the young star center, immediately started praying over her fallen teammate. Lexi Hull grabbed her hand and wouldn't let go. Bree Turner kept telling her that her legs would eventually move, reassuring her through what must have been the most terrifying moment of her life. This is the Indiana Fever that people don't see. The sisterhood that developed during a season that tested them in ways nobody expected. And speaking of that season, let's address the elephant in the room. The Indiana Fever in 2025 has been through absolute chaos. The loss of Caitlin Clark for several games due to injury this season shifted everything. Clark, who's been the face of the franchise and brought unprecedented attention to the team, suddenly being out forced everyone else to step up. Kelsey Mitchell had to carry an even heavier load. The offensive schemes had to be completely reimagined. Players who are used to playing off Clark's incredible court vision and passing suddenly had to create their own opportunities. The pressure multiplied exponentially. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Kelsey said something in that press conference that should make every WNBA executive uncomfortable. She said she wouldn't change anything, that she'd trade her body in every single time, that she literally played until her wheels fell off just like she'd promised. On one hand, that's the mentality of a champion, the dedication that separates good players from great ones. But on the other hand, it's deeply troubling, because what it really means is that the culture of the WNBA demands that level of sacrifice, that players feel they have no choice but to destroy their bodies to prove they belong, to show they're tough enough, to justify their roster spot and their paycheck. Let's put this in perspective. The WNBA season is compressed compared to the NBA. Players are flying commercial, dealing with brutal travel schedules, playing back-to-back games with minimal recovery time. Kelsey specifically mentioned the fatigue that had set in from playing Game 4, leaving the next day, and playing Game 5. That's not enough time for elite athletes to properly recover. Their bodies need rest, need time to repair muscle tissue, replenish fluids, restore energy systems. But the league schedule doesn't allow for that. And when you add playoff intensity on top of an already exhausting regular season, you create a perfect storm for catastrophic injuries like what happened to Kelsey. What happened next would shock everyone. When Kelsey collapsed on the court, the medical team tried to bring out a stretcher. Her response? Absolutely not. She refused the stretcher, refused the wheelchair. In her own words, she said walking out on a stretcher just wasn't going to happen. Not in front of the home crowd, not in front of her teammates, not with the game on the line. So instead, she had to be carried off the court because her feet were literally dangling, unable to support her weight due to complete lack of blood flow. Think about the mental fortitude that takes to be experiencing a medical emergency, unable to control your own body, and still refusing to show weakness. That's warrior mentality. But it's also a symptom of a toxic culture that glorifies playing through injury and punishes any sign of vulnerability. The medical staff, to their credit, acted quickly. Papa Todd, as Kelsey called him, Todd Champlin kept her calm, kept reassuring her that the blood flow would return, that her legs would start moving again. And slowly, in the training room, her toes started to wiggle. Feeling began to return, but the psychological trauma of that moment, that doesn't just go away. Kelsey admitted she was scared, that she panicked, that when she finally reunited with her team after the game, there was a lot of crying, a lot of emotions. These are the human moments that get lost in the highlight reels and box scores. Now let's talk about something that Kelsey mentioned that's been completely overlooked in most coverage of this incident. She said that at the time, she was on her period. She thought the initial symptoms were just cramps, just normal discomfort that female athletes deal with all the time while competing at the highest level. This is huge, because it highlights how little research and attention is paid to how menstrual cycles affect athletic performance and injury risk. Male athletes don't have to factor in hormonal fluctuations, cramping, fluid retention, and all the other physiological changes that come with menstruation. But female athletes do. And the medical protocols, training regimens, and recovery strategies in professional sports are still largely designed with male bodies in mind. Kelsey said she felt her stomach drop to her legs, that she'd just hit a three-pointer and was ready to keep playing when suddenly her body just locked. She couldn't move. When she fell, she landed on Isaac, one of the officials, and felt bad because he had no idea what was happening. Imagine being that official. 1 second you're watching the game, the next second a professional athlete is collapsing on you, unable to control her body. The confusion, the fear, the urgency of that moment. But here's what makes this story even more compelling. The Indiana Fever didn't fold after Kelsey went down. They finished that game. Odyssey Sims, the veteran guard who'd been brought in to provide depth, stepped up huge. Lexi Hull, despite the emotional trauma of watching her teammate collapse, stayed in the game and competed. The entire roster rallied around the absence of their leading scorer, and showed the kind of mental toughness that defines championship teams. Kelsey made sure to give them credit in her press conference, shouting out her teammates for making sure everyone knew their name, for not going out quietly. What happened next revealed something even deeper about the Fever's season. When asked about the adversity the team faced, Kelsey was blunt. Not a lot of people expected them to be in the playoffs at all. The loss of Caitlin Clark for multiple games due to injury was huge. People had to adjust their games, transform their roles, figure out new ways to contribute. The team dealt with a constant rotation of injuries, players coming in and out of the lineup, never having a consistent rotation. And yet they still made it to the playoffs, still competed, still fought. This is where the story gets really interesting from a basketball perspective. The Indiana Fever in 2025 has been a team defined by resilience. With Caitlin Clark being out for several games earlier this season, the entire offensive system had to be reimagined. Clark's ability to create for others, to draw defensive attention, and open up the floor for teammates is what makes the Fever's offense work. Without her, Kelsey Mitchell had to become even more of a primary scorer. Aliyah Boston had to expand her role. Role players had to step into bigger minutes. The coaching staff had to completely adjust their game plans. And now, with Sophie Cunningham joining the Fever roster this season, after her time with the Phoenix Mercury ended in 2024, there's another dynamic shooter who can help spread the floor and take pressure off the primary scorers. Cunningham's toughness and competitive fire fit perfectly with the culture that Kelsey described. A team that refuses to fold, that keeps fighting no matter what adversity comes their way. But let's get back to the core issue here. The fact that a professional athlete can develop rhabdomyolysis during a playoff game should be a wake-up call for the entire WNBA. This isn't about toughness or mental fortitude. This is about player safety, about sustainable workloads, about giving athletes the resources and recovery time they need to perform at their best without risking their long-term health. Kelsey said the doctors told her it was a once-in-a-lifetime thing, that nobody expected rhabdo in a playoff game. But that's not entirely true. Rhabdomyolysis happens when muscles are pushed beyond their limits without adequate recovery. It's preventable. It's a sign that something in the training and competition schedule is fundamentally broken. Here's what nobody's saying out loud. The WNBA is still fighting for legitimacy, for attention, for respect. Players feel enormous pressure to prove they belong, to show they're just as tough as their male counterparts, to never show weakness or ask for help. That creates a culture where players like Kelsey Mitchell feel they have to play through exhaustion, through pain, through warning signs that their body is breaking down. Because if they don't, someone else will take their spot. Someone else will get the minutes, the contract, the endorsements. Kelsey admitted that looking back, she could see signs of fatigue that she dismissed as just part of competing. The travel schedule from Game 4 to Game 5 was brutal. But she did all her normal treatment, all her normal preparation. She committed to the work because that's what professionals do. And her body still shut down. That should terrify everyone involved in women's basketball. Because if someone as dedicated and prepared as Kelsey Mitchell can have this happen, it can happen to anyone. The emotional toll of this incident can't be overstated either. Kelsey talked about how when she reunited with her team after the game, after the medical emergency, after everything, it was just a lot of crying and emotions. These players had done life together for 5 or 6 months. They'd been through battles together. And seeing one of their leaders, one of their toughest competitors, completely helpless on that court, unable to move her own legs, that's traumatic. That stays with you. What's fascinating is how Kelsey framed the entire experience. She said she was grateful it was rhabdo and not something worse. That she could have been sick, could have had something more serious wrong. That perspective is admirable, but also kind of heartbreaking. Because rhabdomyolysis is serious. It's dangerous. It can cause permanent damage. But she's so conditioned to push through, to minimize her own suffering, that even a potentially life-threatening condition feels like dodging a bullet. The learning lesson Kelsey took from this experience is telling. She said she needs to figure out what her body needs to be at a playoff level and maintain that it's about maturing and knowing her body better. But here's the thing. She shouldn't have to learn that lesson by collapsing on the court with her legs paralyzed. The team's medical staff, the coaching staff, the league itself should have protocols in place to prevent this from happening. There should be monitoring systems, mandatory rest periods, load management strategies that protect players from themselves. Because elite athletes will always push too hard. That's what makes them elite. But it's the organization's responsibility to protect them from the consequences of that drive. Now let's talk about what this means for the future of the Indiana Fever and the WNBA as a whole. The Fever have built something special with this roster. The chemistry between players like Aliyah Boston, Kelsey Mitchell, and now with the addition of Sophie Cunningham in 2025 is undeniable. When Caitlin Clark is healthy and on the court, this team has the potential to be absolutely dominant. But they need to stay healthy. They need a system that allows them to compete at the highest level without destroying their bodies in the process. The WNBA is at a crossroads. The league is growing. Viewership is up. Attendance is increasing. Sponsorships are coming in. But if the league wants to sustain that growth, it has to take care of its players. That means better travel accommodations, more reasonable schedules, longer recovery periods between games, better medical monitoring and preventive care. These aren't luxuries. They're necessities if the WNBA wants to avoid more incidents like what happened to Kelsey Mitchell. Before we wrap this up, make sure you're subscribed to this channel because we're going to keep following this story and bringing you the latest updates on the Indiana Fever, Caitlin Clark, Sophie Cunningham, and the entire WNBA. Hit that like button if you think the league needs to do better by its players. And drop a comment telling us what you think about Kelsey's situation. Should the WNBA change its scheduling? Are players being pushed too hard? Let us know your thoughts. Here's the bottom line. Kelsey Mitchell's collapse wasn't just a freak accident. It was a symptom of a larger problem in women's professional basketball. The demands placed on these athletes are unsustainable. The culture that glorifies playing through injury and exhaustion is dangerous. And until the WNBA makes systemic changes to protect its players, we're going to see more incidents like this. More careers cut short. More bodies broken down before their time. Kelsey said she'd trade her body in every time. But she shouldn't have to make that choice. The league should be protecting her, not putting her in positions where that sacrifice becomes necessary. That's the real story here. And it's one that needs to be told, no matter how uncomfortable it makes people. The Indiana Fever showed incredible resilience this season, but resilience shouldn't come at the cost of player safety. It's time for the WNBA to step up and do better, because these athletes deserve it, and the future of women's basketball depends on it.